Hey guys, Sunil here, and this is your weekly broker tip for Friday, July 7th, 2023. Once again, you know I'm not an attorney and don't take this as legal advice. So, this week's tip is around how to prevent personal property disputes in real estate transactions. If you do enough transactions, you eventually will get involved in a dispute where either it's an appliance or a window treatment or a storage shed or something in the home that the buyer thought was staying, the seller decided to take, and then the fun begins. And usually those fights surface within about 24 to 48 hours prior to closing. So that's always fun when you're trying to deal with last minute things, a few hours before closing. So there's a couple things you can do to prevent the majority of personal property disputes. Number one, in section 3 of Form 310 at the bottom, it says parties agree no personal property will transfer as part of the sale except described below and or in attachments. So what I would highly recommend is that you write in whatever appliances are going to convey with the property: refrigerator, washer, dryer, garbage disposal, dishwasher, microwave. Now, obviously, is someone going to rip out a garbage disposal or a dishwasher? 99% of people will not, and there's always the 1% of sellers that you just have to plan for that are going to do crazy things that you never thought would happen. So I just write in all the appliances, and you can also check this box that says and or in attachments. And SCR came out with a new personal property addendum a couple months or so ago, which I'll go over in a second. But what you do is you check this box, you write, whatever's staying, and then you can also add plus items in SCR 530, or you can just write plus SCR 530. And then you go to section 28, and you can also add SCR 530 there and attach it as part of the contract, just list it there. So the other thing to mention is a lot of times agents say, well, it's listed in the MLS, so it has to convey. Not necessarily. For one, the MLS has a disclaimer that the information is deemed reliable but not guaranteed. And then two, the contract clearly says that parties agree no personal property will transfer as part of the sale. So a good argument can be made that the contract trumps the MLS, and so that's why they leave space for you to list items that are conveying. So don't rely on what's in the MLS. Okay, that's the takeaway number one. So what is SCR 530 for those of you who are not familiar with this? It's a new personal property addendum that SCR came up with, like I said, a couple months ago because they were just seeing a ton of disputes around personal property items. And so what they did is they made this 2-page addendum, and they tried to create as exhaustive of a list that they could think of all the different things that are in a home that a seller might think about taking, but that really should stay with the property. So what it says is the buyer and seller agree that the following items, if present on the property on the date of the offer, are included in the sale as part of the purchase price free of liens. Now, you can still, if the seller wanted to sell things separately and ask money for it, you can still use a bill of sale. So if they wanted to charge for some of these things, you could potentially work that in. But you would just have to, modify this addendum somewhat then if that were going to be the case. But one thing to point out, it says that if the items are present on the property on the date of the offer, most of these items will be present. But one thing I see here, for example, is garage door openers. It's a small item. I mean, you can go get a universal garage door opener for $40 at Home Depot or Lowe's. But I've seen people argue over garage door openers because the seller, just didn't have any garage door openers. So if it's listed here, but the seller doesn't have any and they weren't present in the property on the date of the offer, it doesn't mean that the seller has to go out and buy some. But once again, that's a small enough issue that you're not going to let a closing blow up over that. But you can read through the list on your own. It lists all kinds of different things. If you're representing the buyer, I highly recommend using this addendum. If you're representing the seller, it's also a good idea to use the addendum because it prevents disputes. But I would be sure to go through this list and make sure that the seller is willing to leave all these items as part of the purchase price. If not, you need to strike through them or write them in section 2. And then if they wanted to sell it separately and get money from the buyer for those items, you'd have to use a bill of sale. One thing that jumps out at me is, a couple things. Letter N, it says mirrors attached to walls, ceilings, cabinets, or doors, all bathroom wall mirrors. Well, obviously most or not most. The bathroom mirrors should stay. I think most people would agree on that. But a lot of people have mirrors attached to their walls as decor items that I don't think should have to stay with the sale of a house. So make sure to strike through that if your seller has a bunch of mirrors around the house that they don't want to stay. Where's another one that I saw? Oh, letter V, it talks about, it says any and all windows, which is kind of odd. I don't know who's going to take windows. But window screens, doors, door screen blinds, curtain rods, drapery rods, brackets, and all mounting equipment for these items. The one thing that's missing is the curtains themselves, and I think that was intentional. So they list the rods, they list the brackets, they list the mounting equipment for these items, but they don't actually list the curtains. So if you want curtains to stay, then I would write that in at the bottom of section 3. So that's my tip for this week. Hopefully that can help you stay out of disputes over personal property stuff, and enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend.